Mrs. Cynthia Wallace, a gentle elderly woman with a soft smile, walked along Main Street with her cane, picking up a few groceries from the local store. Cynthia, or Miss Lucy, as everyone called her, was a kind, harmless figure in the town, a regular visitor of the Oak Ridge Public Library and known to give sweet treats to kids in her neighborhood. But on this particular fateful day, something unexpected was about to happen. Officer Paul Harson was on his patrol. He seemed to have an eye for small mistakes, and any excuse to show who's in charge was good enough for him. As Miss Lucy carefully stepped out of the store, she noticed Officer Harson standing near the sidewalk, scanning the area. She gave him a polite nod, just like she did to everyone. But just as she adjusted her grip on her cane, her grocery bag tipped slightly, and a single orange rolled onto the street. Trying to catch it before it went too far, Miss Lucy accidentally stepped slightly off the curb. Seeing this, Officer Harson moved in swiftly, blocking her path. "Didn't you see the sign? No loitering!" he snapped, his voice sharp. Miss Lucy was startled and explained softly, "I was only picking up my orange, officer." Not listening, Harson raised his voice even more, accusing her of causing disturbance on public property. Cynthia's eyes widened in shock. Before she could respond, he grabbed her by the arm, rougher than anyone expected. In his frustration, he pulled too hard, causing her to stumble, and when she tried to balance herself, he raised his fist and hit her lightly across the face. A small crowd began to gather, people gasping, shocked at what they were seeing. Miss Lucy was shaken, her hand to her cheek, her grocery bag spilled on the ground. Little did Officer Harson know that this moment would turn his world upside down. Just a few blocks away, her son, Alan Wallace, was shopping in the Oak Ridge Mall. Alan was a tall, well-built man in his mid-30s, and unlike the casual folks in town, he wore a crisp suit and carried himself with a sense of authority. Alan wasn't just any man, he was the head of internal affairs for the Oak Ridge Police Department. Known for his no-nonsense attitude and high standards, Alan believed in justice and had no tolerance for officers who misused their power. Alan's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he picked up right away when he saw it was his mother. But this call was different. He could hear her unsteady breath on the other end. "Alan, it's me, something happened." Her voice was barely a whisper, but he could sense the strain in it. His heart skipped. "Where are you, Mom?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She told him her location, and within minutes, Alan was racing toward Main Street. When he arrived, he could see a crowd gathered, with Miss Lucy standing helplessly on the sidewalk, her cheek red, and her groceries scattered across the ground. Officer Harson was standing over her, looking impatient. Alan didn't hesitate. He walked up, and without a word, helped his mother to her feet. Then, he turned to Officer Harson. "Excuse me, officer," he said, his voice calm but unmistakably stern. Harson looked confused for a moment, and then realization dawned on him. The man standing before him wasn't just any concerned citizen. He was Alan Wallace, the head of internal affairs. Alan's position made him one of the most powerful figures in the police department, the man who could investigate and discipline officers. Harson swallowed, his face paling slightly. Alan fixed him with a steady stare. "Would you mind explaining why my mother was hurt in public like this?" he asked, loud enough for the onlookers to hear. The crowd began murmuring, and the officer started to sweat. He mumbled excuses, but Alan's expression remained unmoved. "It doesn't look like a small misunderstanding, officer," Alan said firmly. "Let's have a proper discussion back at the station." At the Oak Ridge Police Station, Alan wasted no time. Officer Harson was led into a private room, where Alan sat across from him, silent but watchful. So, you think grabbing a senior citizen and causing her harm is a good way to handle the job? Alan asked, his tone steady, but each word sharp. Harson, now visibly nervous, stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but Alan wasn't interested in his explanations. We'll review the security footage from Main Street, Alan continued, and if it confirms what the witnesses described, you'll be facing charges for abuse of authority and physical assault. Harson's eyes widened. He hadn't expected this. The swift, severe consequences of his actions were sinking in. Alan made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate any officer misusing power, and Harson would have to answer for his actions. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread around town. People were talking, grateful that someone as respectable as Alan was willing to stand up for his mother and the community. By the end of the day, Officer Harson was suspended, pending a full investigation, and the townspeople felt a sense of relief. Miss Lucy, though shaken, was proud of her son for standing up for what was right. Alan accompanied his mother home, making sure she was comfortable. As they sat together, Cynthia placed her hand on his, a small smile on her face. "Thank you, Alan," she said softly. He nodded, feeling a sense of peace. The officer's harsh behavior would not go unpunished, and Oak Ridge was once again a safe place for everyone, especially for Miss Lucy. And that's how justice returned to the little town of Oak Ridge, proving that some people in power are willing to protect even the frailest among them. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Kindly subscribe for more thrilling stories. Like and share this video. Have a nice day.